Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld, the unofficial podcast companion piece to the hit HBO show Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Gene Lyons, and alongside me is my co-host, Big D, Dick Ebert.
Good evening.
This is our deep dive episode where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and provide our thoughts and analysis. This week's episode was entitled Akane no Mai. Big D, what'd you think?
The first time through, I wasn't a huge fan. And second time through, I can see more what they're doing. I enjoyed some of the Dolores and Teddy interactions. But overall, it just felt like an uneven episode that I'm feeling like in a couple weeks, we'll see that this episode was necessary to move the plot along, but it's not going to be one of the highlights of the season.
I think part of it is we might have been spoiled by episodes 2 and 3 and even 4 to an extent. There was so much going on and they were such strong episodes that maybe this one paled in comparison, but you need those changes of pace. You know, you need different movements and different tempos. And I was surprised by how harsh people were on this episode on social media and in a lot of the email that we got at hosts@shatontv.com. People were not impressed. They felt like it was filler. And to me, I feel like a filler episode is one that goes nowhere, that doesn't tell you anything about the world. And I think about shows like Star Trek or Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where they would have multiple filler episodes that went nowhere, and they were just explorations of different themes. I don't think this was that.
I mean, I don't think it was filler, but a lot of the themes we've already gotten. You know, we understand Maeve's drive for her daughter. To spend a full episode with Maeve just reinforcing the importance of love, and if it was just to unlock her new ability, in the end, you know, for the season, you figure we're now halfway through. This is the midway mark. To dedicate almost 40 minutes just to reinforce her drivers and for her to develop this new power, I think might have been wasted screen time.
For listeners who haven't listened to Shat on TV before, the way we do the show is we have a Sunday Instacast where we talk immediately about our reaction to the show. On Friday, we have our Telegraph where we go over listener mail. And this is our deep dive. So this is where we drill down into some of the themes that came up in the episode. And we don't go follow the plot in a linear fashion. Much like Westworld, we jump around on major themes. So this episode of the deep dive, we're going to talk about the title, Akane no Mai, some of the theories that disintegrated before our very eyes on this episode. We're going to talk about Dolores' plan and getting a little clarity on that. And also talk about Maeve's new mind control powers, whether we like them or we don't like them, how they work and what it means about the world that we're looking at. And also the Teddy experiment. We saw a huge turn of events for Teddy in this episode, so we're going to drill deeper into that. So for starters, I think we should get into that episode title. There are a couple different ways to read it, and I thought this is one of the more revealing episode titles. Sometimes they're cute or vague or a really deep literary dive. This one was could be interpreted several different ways, but most of them were fairly superficial.
Yeah, so Akane is both the color red, and it's also the character's name. And we got a bunch of feedback, people writing in, either native Japanese or who spoke the language, and so we appreciate the help. But yeah, it's the color, it's the name, and it depends on the specific kanji that's used. And Mai can mean dance, which would make the title, you know, Akane's Dance or the Red Dance, which makes sense with the episode, you know, that we see the finale where they're performing for the Shogun, and either it is Akane's Dance or the Red Dance. And then alternatively, Mai could mean lost child, or it can mean my own, making it something like it's Akane's own. So there's a lot of different meanings for the title, and I think they're all applicable to this episode.
One of the things I really look forward to is going back over Westworld once the whole thing is over, or even season to season, and really pondering the significance of the titles. And we've seen in this series that the titles can have a lot of importance even beyond their immediate usage. They have longevity. Chestnut, I think, is a good example that, you know, we found out that the control units are called chestnuts. Chestnut was, I think, episode 2 of season 1. So it goes back, you know, pretty far. And I think that, again, Riddle of the Sphinx, it's having more meaning as we go along. The well-tempered clavier. And so on this one, Akane's Dance, I hope this character sticks around. I'd really like to see where this character goes. I wouldn't be wholly disappointed if we didn't see much more of Shogun World in the future, but I do think that they spent so much time developing it that it will be that at least some of these characters will play a role going forward.
Yeah, you have to hope that the time that they spent getting us to invest, and the way I anticipate, at the end of the episode, Maeve is encouraging them to come with, our merry band of Sizemore and Maeve and Sylvester and Felix. So I would anticipate that the next episode we spend a little more time in Shogun and then hopefully take them on the road, because it would be interesting to see what these characters make of Westworld.
So with the character of Sakura, we talked about, that Mai could mean my own, and Sakura being belonging in a way to Akane. When I first watched the episode, the scene in the Japanese Mariposa, I thought that Sakura was in the role of Clementine in the brothel, but it seems more like she's playing the daughter role.
Yeah, I think she represents the motherly instinct, that they're both mothers, that Sakura was rescued by her and she rehabilitated her. And for all intents and purposes, it might not be her biological child, but yes, she took care of her. Maeve, as the madam of the Mariposa, didn't have that character. Yeah, Clementine was her subordinate. I guess she was like, the I don't know what her title would be in a brothel. Maybe she was the assistant manager, but they didn't they didn't seem to have that close of a bond. So maybe this is, a hybrid of those two characters, because they needed a way to have the current Mariposa or the current Japanese Mariposa madam have a love for another character, but we didn't have a full season to explore it.
Big D, what's the only job worse than crack whore?
The assistant crack whore?
That's right. So this episode followed Maeve for the most part, and we learned a lot about her and the way she sees the world, the way she influences the world. Another thing that we saw with regards to Maeve was watching a theory fall apart. And in this episode, I love watching a theory fall apart, especially if it's a strong theory and especially if it's my own. And I thought that there is no way that the reason why Maeve couldn't control the Ghost Nation characters was that she didn't speak the language. I was like, that seems really stupid. It's got to be something bigger than that. It's got to be something about their programming, the way they're built differently. And it still could be. But I think in this episode, that theory kind of fell apart, where we saw that in Shogun World, again, initially she had no power because language barrier.
Well, I think they're doing a little bit of hand waving, because Stubbs, when he encounters Ghost Nation, he tries freeze all motor functions, which implies at some point the English verbal commands worked on Ghost Nation. So are we led to believe from this episode that the simple reason it's not working anymore is because of, the spread of the reveries?
It seems like, and we had a really strong email, I think, that we'll cover in the Telegraph, hopefully, that talks about why this is the way it is. And it seems like all hosts have a set of languages that they understand. And it makes sense, right? You got an amusement park, you got people coming in from all over the world. You want your host to, it would be a really shitty experience if you went to Shogun World and none of the hosts understood English. You'd have a really tough time there, right? So they're supposed to be able to understand, any language that might be spoken by a human, a guest, but they should not be able to speak themselves in a language that they wouldn't understand. It's not in their language set going outbound route. And so I think what happened here is part of the park's meltdown is the fact that the hosts have stopped understanding languages other than the ones they themselves speak.
No, but that's not it, because the Ronin understands what she's saying. He looks at her, and for the moment, Maeve gets that shit-eating grin on her face, like she's, haha, look, I've done it. I've gotten him to listen to me. And then he tells the other, Japanese host to gag her, because he understood that she was saying, stand down, we're not a threat. And then she tells the other humans, or then she tells Sizemore, you see, I got this under control. He identifies her verbal commands as a threat, but for some reason, the English doesn't work as the master command. And that's my only issue with it. he knew what she was saying, but because it wasn't in Japanese, it didn't have the, the master key function to the verbal command had to be followed.
Interestingly enough, Carrie pointed out also in a second watch that all the hosts who had basically sealed their ears shut or had their ears sealed shut, the Shogun's men.
Yeah.
When he's like, take them to their quarters, and they're all like, okay.
Yeah, I thought that exact same thing.
Hear him?
Yeah, and wasn't that a little? I understand he's leaking cortical fluid, but that's a bit rash. Wouldn't one of the soldiers be like, Shogun, can we put some cotton in our ears, or could we? Is there something else we could do? Some wax? I really think, and they seem to heal up pretty well for like maybe 8 hours since they were cauterized. I'd imagine they'd take a little longer.
Well, they used that little the host torch. That's what they did. The Man in Black host torch. They're fine. I think another thing we found out here, it's a question that everyone's had, and I certainly thought that it was reasonable to believe that each park had its own director, its own writing team, its entirely own staff, and Westworld was just one. It seems now, through what Sizemore was relaying about writing the 300 storylines and copying a few over to save time and effort, that there is at least a singular head writing staff, and perhaps that Ford was director of all of it.
Yeah, but you say like theories crushed. For me, this raises some more questions. Why would you have one head writer instead of specialists in each of the areas? If you're a Western expert, you're not going to write as good, stories about the Edo period in Japan as you would about the Old West in the U.S. But number one, why did he only have 3 weeks to convert this narrative over to the Japanese version? And also, if I'm a paying guest, right, I go to Westworld every couple years. It's getting a bit boring. I need something new to juice me up. I go over to Shogun World, and it's the exact same rehash of what I had just done. I'm going to be pissed.
That's a good point. Also, when you think about the cost of running these parks, the cost of a salary of a writer versus like a host that you're allowed to shoot at, I imagine the hosts are way more expensive than Sizemore's salary.
Yeah, and I love the fact that Sizemore gets insecure. At the end, when Maeve is, I think, presenting the offering to the Shogun, and Sizemore looks at Maeve and he goes, "Did you just improvise that?" He says, "That's good. That's good." I think besides being afraid for his life, Sizemore thinks his job might be in jeopardy if the park ever stays open or goes back to normal.
All right, so you mentioned that these aren't necessarily theory crushers, but I do have one that you had, and I wonder if you are now dissuaded from believing that you had the odd notion that the host bodies floating in the water were an ambush. So they were going to pop up, as you said, like in Thriller, and start attacking people. Do you now believe that that's still a possibility, or are you off that train?
Okay, I don't ever remember saying that. I remember you making the joke about it. And when we were going back and forth, when we were communicating between recordings, I did do the Thriller meme, but that was a joke. I don't believe I ever said that in any kind of serious tone.
I have the Slack record. We could put it up for a vote and see what people think. Was Big D serious?
No, because my wife has taught me one thing. If I claim I didn't say it, I probably did. So it's possible. I don't remember it, but no, that's ridiculous. I have another theory for what's going on in the valley.
All right, and then finally we had Dolores going into this season. I think we were led to believe that Dolores was supposed to be the most powerful host in the sense that she was different. We've been told that she's special. You see Arnold or Bernard speaking with her at the beginning of this entire season, saying that you frighten me. And so now we see that Maeve has this entire wide-ranging skill set and superlative abilities. Do you believe that Dolores is no longer the strongest host in the world? Do you think that Maeve has superseded her? I think this shows what we're seeing Maeve do right now. Dolores is nowhere near that. So is Dolores special in a different way? Or do you think that this crushes the idea that Dolores was the prime host?
I've felt since the beginning that Dolores always seemed like she was being forced. She was still on script. Maeve was the only one who broke from a narrative to get on the train, infiltrate the mainland. She chose to break that due to the memory and the triggering of the little girl on the train leaving the park. Dolores, everything she's done tells me she's still on script. In her head, she still has Dolores. She still has Wyatt. These are two narratives that were programmed into her, and she seems to be following a path. Maeve, since the end of season 1, has been off on her own. So I got to believe that Maeve has the edge on, she may not have gone through the maze, but she's reached some kind of a higher level of awareness. And the way that these two characters are going, Dolores has always been, seeming like she's the messiah for the host, that she's going to set the people free. She's going to build an army. Maeve was always out for herself. That might be changing a bit. Do we see that these two eventually will go on to some kind of crash course and will, come at odds with each other?
We even had a Telegraph come in this week that talked about the fact that Maeve seems to be really linked to Ford, that you see Ford working with her, working on her in her recovery, and you see Arnold or Bernard seems to work with Dolores mainly, and that these are basically like their proxies in a clash. I wouldn't go that far, but I do think that these two will have, I think it's more likely that they will clash than they will unite, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and if they clash anytime soon, I think Dolores is going to get worked.
One thing I'm glad you mentioned was the Wyatt thing too, because I always refer to Evan Rachel Wood's character as Dolores. We talk about her as Dolores, and there is Wyatt in there. And I would say in this season, actually, Wyatt's probably on screen more. Whether it's an attribute of the way Evan Rachel Wood has been directed to make it ambiguous as to which she is playing, it would be a lot weirder if she spoke in a different voice or carried herself physically differently. But it is sometimes hard to tell which one is on screen, and I think that's useful. And there may not even be a clear line of distinction between the two, where they're intermingled. But it is important when we do talk about this character, this host, that we always make note that there is a Wyatt in there as well, and we should make note that there is who Wyatt is supposed to be, right? Military leader, and not to just think of it as the rancher's daughter all the time.
If you pay attention to the little subtle nuances of her voice and accent, it's a dead giveaway. Anytime that Dolores is having a conversation with Teddy, where she wants to appeal to his sensitive side or try to elicit an emotional response, she turns on that, "Come on, Teddy, do you remember we wanted to look at the valley one last time, and Father had the herd with the blue tongue?" And then the second she calls to hold Teddy, it's "hold him down." She's giving us those little cues to tell us which character it is. Just like Bernard's character, you can tell that there's a slight difference from scene to scene.
All right, so following along Dolores, let's talk a little bit about her plan. In this episode, we finally saw why she went to Sweetwater. What is she up to, Big D?
Okay, so this is like Dolores' master plan. And last week, you got a little frustrated with all the tinfoil and people just coming up with theories out of the blue that had no kind of basis in fact. So I tried to break this out like I was going to make a case for you with, what was our general idea of what her mission was, what was the steps that would need to take place to make that happen, and what on screen has validated that. So I think we can all agree that her goal is to get her team of hosts that she has decided are worthy out of the park and into the real world. Would you agree with that?
I agree with that, but I would take it a step further and say that she wants to destroy mankind. Like, I think that she's expressly said, either Dolores or Wyatt has expressly said that she wants to take them down, that no one is safe. So I think it's this, yes, get disappear into the park, possibly the real world, and strike offensively at some point.
Okay, so I don't think those two are mutually exclusive. So she can, start her revenge in the park. Then, without them surviving and getting out of the park, there's no hope for her complete revenge. So if we can say her goal is survival and revenge. So step one, what do you have to do? So I think step one would be a mission that she's already stated, is to locate William's secret weapon that he revealed to her in the end of episode 2 reunions, which is the facility that's in the Western Valley. He shows it to Dolores in episode 2, and this is also the identical valley that is flooded in the premiere because you can compare screenshots and identify the actual rock formations. So we know that this is the same location. So I've identified that I think is step 1 in her mission.
Okay, that makes sense. I follow so far. So the overall mission is to disappear into the park, and step 1 of that is to find the weapon facility that right now, well, that at some point in the show we see underwater, but is not underwater during the time period where she's looking for it.
That's correct. And this is the only step that I think is hypothetical, because the purpose of this, to find this location, the weapon, would be to gain some form of advantage to be able to facilitate revenge on mankind. But I think it's also for them to produce new bodies or to commandeer new bodies, because you can't have Dolores's 1/3 of that group that's floating in the water, or whoever she's identified as worthy. There's an accountability for all of the hosts. You know, we'd seen earlier last season that they've identified a head count, the host serial numbers, their history. You can't make a host disappear without Delos being aware of which hosts they're looking for.
Also, this would answer the whole explosives in the spine thing too, because people have pointed out from episode 1 that if Dolores ever plans to get out of the park or get her team out of the park, they got to get rid of the explosives in their spines, assuming that they're there, like Maeve had.
Yeah, right. So that is step 2. So step 2 is you have to get the explosives out of the spine, and then you also have to make it so that these hosts can't be identified. In this episode, we hear in the Mesa that one of the techs is running diagnostics on all of the bodies that they've pulled out of the Western Valley flood. And we learn that 1/3 of the hosts have virgin control units. And they make a distinction between a wiped version of a control unit, a broken control unit. The tech actually says there's no fingerprints. It's as if these control units never held data in the first place. And that obviously tells you the answer, because a host without any data ever in their control unit, how would they function as a host?
Right. Now, Jonathan Nolan has said that the brain part of a host, that physical brain part that we've seen, is functional, in the sense that they said that if you give a host a lobotomy, it would impact their personality, that there are corresponding parts of the brain that could impact personality and cognitive skills. So it's not entirely a mechanical device or a digital device. There are organic components to it. Whether it's, I shouldn't say organic, it could be synthetic brain too, but basically that control unit isn't all of the thinking part of the host. But I was asking the same question, were they just dropped there? I mean, could they walk there on their own? And I think that's something that we don't quite know.
I think it would almost be like a person in a vegetative state. Yeah, the basic control unit will have them breathe, it'll have them blink, it'll have them appear to be alive, but they won't be able to do much more than that. So for 1/3 of these hosts to have fresh units, that tells you that they were swapped out. So my guess in deducing in that is that those 1/3 of the control units are now in a new body. They're in some form of new host that we've either seen before or one that has not been identified yet, that would allow them to remain anonymous. So now that gets us to step 3, right? So now you've swapped out the hosts. You have to start covering your tracks. So at this point, we have to gain entrance into the Mesa and into the Cradle's data center, because that's where all the host data is backed up. If you wipe and replace 1/3 of the hosts without getting rid of the backups, it's not going to be too hard for the Delos techs or the QA to figure out what you've done and which host or which bodies they're looking for.
Okay, and basically, again, we've seen the entrance. That same entrance has been entered by the QA team, and that's where they found Charlotte Hale. That's that same entrance, right, to the Mesa. So we've seen train tracks going in there.
Yeah, and that's a question that Carrie had was, what is Dolores doing with the train in Sweetwater, that they're stripping it down? And then Coach Marcus tweeted and said, hey, we've already seen the answer of what her goal is. It was that smoking tunnel into the back end of the Mesa that we had seen when it was episode 3 with, Glassless Bernard, the Delos security team, Strand, and they walk in discussing the smoking tunnel, and they say, the cradle somebody attacked the cradle, it's destroyed. So we know that something happened in that tunnel, and in this episode, it's just reinforced when Angela rides into town to Dolores, and she's been interrogating one of the staff members, and divulges that the staff member said, yes, Peter has been taken to the Mesa. So it makes complete sense that step 3 would be gain entrance to the Mesa and the cradle data by ramming the train into that tunnel and causing the damage that we see in episode 3.
Yeah, and the direct quote from that situation report is, "We got the go-ahead from Recon. We're clear to enter, but it's a fucking mess. The system's totally down, including simunitions. Floors 42 through 45 are still on fire. Someone took out the cradle. It's a slaughterhouse in there."
Right, so that fits with everything that we've seen. So now they've replaced the host. They've gotten that piece of the data. They now have access to the cradle. They've destroyed all of the backups. We know it's a success because the dialogue that you just said, that Strand is now concerned that they've lost a third of the park's IP. So step 5, you have to continue to cover your tracks. And this is where we get to the valley, the Western Valley, where William's biggest mistake, the facility, the weapon, is hidden. In the premiere, it's underwater. We know earlier on it wasn't, because all of the QA and Bernard and Stubbs, they're all shocked at the water. We always assumed that the water was used as a way to commit mass suicide for the hosts. But what if the actual water was used to kind of blurry the situation? Number one, you confuse the QA to think it was a mass suicide of hosts, but it's really meant to cover up the evidence of what they did inside of the hidden facility.
Yeah, I mean, water causes a lot of damage, A. B, it's very tough to divert or clean up. You could put out a fire pretty easily. A physical resistance of, say, hosts in some sort of wave attacks or human wave attacks would be effective for a while. Water is a pain in the ass.
Yeah, and we know it was successful because Strand gives the order to drain the valley and skim all the bodies. You wouldn't go through the hassle of draining the valley unless there was something underneath it that you knew you had to access. If it was just recovering Stetsons, like he says, you could do that without. I can't imagine the work it's going to take for them to drain all that water.
To be fair, he said dredging, so they're not necessarily going to drain the whole thing. They could just be scooping it out. But I think that they will drain it. I think that's a fair assumption because they want to get to the bottom of what's going on there. But you could dredge the body of water and get all the bodies, hats, pistols, and everything out of there.
And we know it's the identical location because they clearly showed it. And there's screenshots that you can go find online. Then I'll link it in the podcast where it's a unique identifying terrain that lets you know this is the exact spot that we saw William digging in episode 2. So if this follows a normal progression, it seems to back up what her ultimate goal would be, and all the pieces kind of fit into what we've seen on screen. You got any problems with this? Is there anything that you could poke any big holes in it right now?
I think the key that we're getting here is that we can tie Dolores' plan to a series of events that we know have occurred. We know that the water is there. We know there's been the explosion in the tunnel. We know that she wanted the train, and it does seem odd. I can't think of anybody else who had the motivation to clear out 1/3 of the hosts and put virgin units into their heads. So it all seems to match up. Is it a bulletproof theory or a bulletproof a timeline? No. Is it more plausible than anything else I've heard? Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think anything in the show is bulletproof. But to me, it seems logical. So anybody out there listening, if you have a problem with it, please shoot some holes in it.
All right, one thing we are certain about is Maeve now can control minds. And I have mixed feelings about this. When I first saw it, I was like, oh man, like it feels like it's too soon. It feels like it's a Jedi thing and it's the Matrix. And I wasn't alone in this. People online were expressing that they felt this was too much power for one character and that it kind of gave her infinite possibilities of how to act. But again, let's dive deeper into it though. What actually can she do, and are there vulnerabilities there?
Yeah, but I'm curious to hear, because we've seen since last season, when Maeve reprogrammed herself, that she can use voice commands on almost any host and get them to do what she wants, as long as she uses the right language. So I don't see, if people are okay with her verbally telling someone else to do, her new power, I don't think should come as such a shock. But, in the premiere episode, Bernard gives us somewhat of a background onto what could be going on here. And Charlotte and Bernard are discussing that there's the mesh network, that it's almost like a Bluetooth connection. It's not park-wide, but the hosts can communicate on a subconscious level with all of the hosts that are directly around them. Then those can connect to the ones around them, like a colony of ants. So this network could explain Maeve's new power. And her new power, it comes in two parts. Number one, when they're sitting in the Japanese version, the Mariposa, and the ninjas are about to attack, Maeve hears, again, if you have the subtitles on, she hears a whispering. It's almost like a ghostly voice. She has a quick series of visual apparitions of the attack, and it's enough that she can move out of the way and doesn't get hit by a dagger. So she's tapped into some kind of subconscious communication that allowed her to be aware that this attack was coming.
I just want to point out at this point that Shogun World seems like no fun. Like, I was thinking about, Westworld, there's whiskey and there's a brothel and there's horseback riding and there's shooting stuff and there's cowboys. And I was like, you get attacked by ninjas. There's a pissed off shogun. You see geishas dancing. Really, like, it just seems like a really crappy place to visit.
I don't know. I think it was kind of cool, because Westworld was kind of tame. Not that I want to immediately go to threat level 10, but it seems like you don't know what's going to go on. It's a lot more dangerous and a lot more exciting. You can tell the kids' safeties are off, and Maeve's getting frustrated. She said something like, I said, let's sit down and have a talk. I didn't mean let's have a drink. I wanted to figure out the quickest way out of here. And Sizemore is sitting with his cup of tea. There, it seems much less that the guests can just dictate their adventure. It seems that you're more at the will of the park. And for me as a guest, I would like that.
I guess this is why there's a lot of country bars in Arizona, but not a lot of geisha bars. I think it's basically maybe as a over westernized young man, I just don't understand. I just call myself young, yeah. So as I was saying, it's a danger-filled place. Maeve uses that danger though to discover a new power. I thought for sure when she was being choked by the ninja that we were going to see another one of Westworld's patented blackout scenes where she was going to go unconscious, and then she'd wake up somewhere and we'd have a new path to discovery. That's not what happened.
Oh, no. Right as she's about on the brink of death, or at least blacking out, you hear those whispers again, and she taps into what has to be that mesh network. And she realizes that she can now subconsciously connect with all the hosts around her. And she issues a silent order for that one ninja to impale himself on the wall, which obviously scares the shit out of the other ninjas. Because if you and I were raiding a village and we were trying to abduct a geisha, and I just saw you kill yourself after someone told you to, I would be a little concerned. But, Maeve just explains it away that she's found her new voice.
And there's been some speculation that new voice is not from within herself, that she has discovered a voice, like the bicameral mind voice in her head. I don't buy that. I think that she is speaking more directly, that basically she's found a different way to communicate is what she's talking about. And this gives her a special ability in the sense that she doesn't have to verbally say something. It's like on Harry Potter. So sometimes you've got spells that need to be uttered. Other times spells can just be done, at will. But Maeve is unique in this way because the only other creature or thing that we've seen be able to do this is Ford, and he's presumably dead at this point. So Maeve is unique in that capability.
But does that make you question how Ford was able to? Because when we saw him in the restaurant communicate with all the hosts around him, the servers, then the workers in the field, then the construction with the earth movers, how could a human being, unless you've got some kind of like an adapter implanted and you have these powers, doesn't this just raise the questions again about Ford being not human, being a host the whole time?
I don't think it does, and here's why. Think about an Xbox, okay? You've got your regular controllers for the Xbox, but for a while now, Xbox has also had Kinect. It's a motion sensing apparatus that can read your body and your movement and then let you play the game that way, right? Imagine, again, much like the fishbowl, imagine all of Westworld is a series of sensors. Every host is a sensor, and there could be more sensors throughout the place that control things like the algorithm that keeps you from dying from being shot or swords hitting you. If everything's being tracked all the time, any subtle cue from Ford could trigger any reaction that he wanted. It's like he can play the entire world just at will.
So I like that. At least there's some, plausible explanation. But you see how technology isn't perfect with facial recognition, or you would hope if you were Ford that you'd have some fail-safe other than the hosts have to always visually recognize you as Dr. Ford to know that little finger wave means, turn off. Because the only other host that we've seen subconsciously control their hosts around them was Angela in the presentation with Logan in the second episode this season, that she's able to freeze the room instantly with the wave of her finger. So it could be some kind of recognition, but I like the idea that it is the mesh network and that you can't immediately communicate from, say, where Maeve is right now all the way to Westworld, because you're daisy chaining. It's almost like the telephone game. You whisper in someone's ear, they whisper in another, they whisper in another. And that could be explained why Maeve, at the end of the episode, when you have the Shogun's army charging after someone hit the gong, that she can't just make them all freeze at a distance. She needs to be in close proximity to issue those commands. And I think that comes with some fucking danger.
Well, absolutely. It is a limit to the power, which is always good. Even in the best comic book, with the best superhero, you want them to have some sort of limit to their power. But also, we've shown that she's not necessarily wielding this power responsibly, in the sense that, she could just have people lay down their arms. She doesn't have to have them kill each other. And so it seems like Maeve is a bit rash here, or maybe a bit hyper violent. And that giving her absolute power could be dangerous.
Yeah, I wonder if she even realizes that she's slowly turning to the dark side, because she's always been about giving, the hosts a chance to have their freedom, to find their own agency. And you said she could have told all the samurai, or she could have told all the Shogun's warriors to just freeze, just lock down, go sit in the back, drop your weapons. She tells them all to kill each other. And she's removing any chance of these hosts becoming aware like she did. So she is essentially becoming almost as bad as the humans. She's treating them like a disposable object. She's removing any chance that these hosts have of gaining the same agency that she has. So I don't even know if she realizes that she's kind of becoming more like Ford, more like the guests, and less the liberator.
If Maeve had stood up on a soapbox and told everybody, I am going to liberate all the hosts and everyone will be free to make their own decisions and yada, 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 I'd be like, this show sucks. I don't like this character. I like the fact that she never claimed to be fair. She never claimed to be a savior. She never claimed to be the good guy. She is moving of her own will at her own agency. And I could totally see in the same scenario where, even though I would want to protect others around me and that I had sympathies with certain other hosts, that I'm totally fine with the assholes who captured me, who are attacking me and killing each other. I don't give a shit.
No, but why would you do that? Wouldn't you rather have them create some kind of like a vanguard, like an honor guard, and surround you? You could tell them all instantly, hey, you are now sworn to protect me. You have them all just circle around you. You're now free to walk to the lake that they want to go to and go down into the tunnels. You've now, again, you're not completely freeing these hosts, but you haven't killed them all. Plus, you've ensured your security, at least for a little bit. Wouldn't that make more sense?
Yeah, but sometimes you got to go Star-Lord, Sometimes you just do dumb shit.
Okay.
So I got to ask, though, speaking of doing dumb shit, is Westworld jumping the shark at this point? Because for me, I feel like this sort of revelation of power or this sort of ascension is like a season 4 kind of thing. Season 2 seems really early for this. And where can they go from here?
Yeah, the problem I have with this is if the mesh network allows the host to communicate almost in a daisy chain, how have they not thought of some kind of a defensive protocol to protect against, like the lysine contingency in Jurassic Park? Why didn't the park put into a policy that says, okay, if it goes down and somebody hits the button that says, we're at the actual fail safe, we're at the dead last minute, that we're going to institute the mesh network to cause all of the vertebrae to explode. So a host tells the ones next to them, explode. They explode, goes to the next, to remove the whole threat from the park and protect human life. So if this power can be wielded for, the hosts, like you said, jumping the shark, I only think it's jumping the shark since there's no applicable power that's been demonstrated by the humans and the management in the park.
Delos' response to the whole thing has been phenomenally terrible. I mean, like if you look at this part, like it is not going well from a containment perspective. And it's interesting that, there are hosts out there who don't even know that there's anything going on at all. But I think we've seen that there are no guests around at least. So that's good. But as things are getting out of control, you see that that this revolution is moving on to its second phase right now. So it seems like the QA team is in a fairly limited effectiveness. The hosts are all moving about
fairly a limited effectiveness. I can understand if you're struggling with a guarded fort with Fort Forlorn Hope, where there's armed guys. How do you have a QA team with automatic weapons, with all the technology, communications? How do you get overrun by a group of shoguns and ronins with swords?
Well, I think it's because of two things. One is QA seems very, very interested in finding Peter Abernathy above all else. And interestingly enough, nobody else seems to care about where Peter is other than Dolores, right? So it's odd that like the man in black, he doesn't seem to give a shit about where Peter is.
No, but I'm saying if I give you, Roger, and King B, I equip you guys, you get an electric buggy, you all get automatic weapons, you get some grenades, and I drop you into Shogun World. Are the three of you going to end up on sticks with wicker cages on your head?
Have you ever fought a forest ninja? They're stealthy.
Come on, I'm confident that you can survive that. They might get Roger, because he's going to get winded easily. But if your cardio is on point, and you have an automatic weapon, how are they going to get a whole squad?
Yeah, I mean, I was surprised by it, honestly. I didn't realize it at first until the dialogue hit that that's what they were supposed to be. I thought they were just random Japanese dudes, and I was like, oh shit, that's the rescue squad. And again, something that we didn't talk about on the Instacast really was the walkie-talkie that Sizemore pulls. It's almost like he was expecting them to be there, or do you think he's just resourceful?
I think he's just resourceful, but I mean, that's a ballsy move. Maeve hasn't made me think if I'm Sizemore that she's going to kill me. But if she finds that you're openly trying to betray her, he's increasing the likelihood of her turning Hector loose on him and him getting killed. So I don't know that I would take that chance. But to me, the deadliest weapon in any park that we've seen so far is the lasso. Why isn't there no lassos like this in Westworld?
And why are they doing like Japanese sex bondage ropes? What was that all about? They were like making little bralettes and... Did you notice that? Those like bondage knots.
Again, bondage knots is not my expertise. How could you identify these bondage knots?
I got a friend, Reggie, who did a demo for me a couple weeks ago, so I've seen them all. Moving right along, let's talk about Teddy.
Okay, so now I learned something new about Teddy this week, that Teddy's actually died 5,746 times. To be exact, except for the water drowning. Did you know that?
I did not know that. I know he's died a lot of times, but we were told early on in the series that Teddy was kind of made. He's a bullet sponge. He's a punching bag.
Even though he's been Dolores' sidekick since even before Sweetwater was built, Dolores realizes that as much as she cares about Teddy, and she's run him through some tests the last couple days where she was questioning the relationship. They make sweet robot love. They take a trip down memory lane. They go out to the pasture to see the herds. And Dolores is hoping that turn 5,747 will be different. And Teddy can man up. He can become the man that she wants. So right at the point where we think she's going to accept Teddy and say, I realize we're supposed to be together. You're the right one. She flips the script on poor Teddy, and he's in for a rude awakening.
As a testament to Evan Rachel Wood's performance and the Dolores/Wyatt character, every scene where she's alone with Teddy, I'm filled with dread. Like I was just like, oh God, like here it comes. Even when they went to bed together, I'm like, he's in trouble. And it's interesting because if you look back over the actual physical interaction, and even to a degree the dialogue, there's nothing inherently sinister about it until they start talking about the plague, and you see that Teddy's got a much softer approach to what he would do with an infected a herd of cattle. He's showing that he either can't overcome his programming, or that's just his nature, is that he's forgiving, he's kind, and he wants to give every creature a chance. That's definitely not Dolores' way.
I feel worried for poor Teddy that there's no situation when he's alone with Dolores where he's going to come out unscathed, unscarred, or unchanged.
So let's talk about that plague story, though, that she tells him. So she says that basically there's a plague among the cattle. They thought it went from cattle to cattle, but it turned out that it was actually carried by flies. And she asks Teddy, what he'd do in that situation. He said, I take the weakest ones, I put them in a barn, keep them isolated, keep them protected, and wait it out. Try to let even the weakest survive. And Dolores says, no, we burn, my daddy burned the bodies, and flies hate smoke. And that's how they beat it. They culled the herd, basically. And she's using that herd as a metaphor for the hosts. And again, kind of expressing this view, a very fascist view, I might add, that this is the path of the valley beyond, that some people have to be sacrificed, that the weaker ones have to be sacrificed, and that is necessary to triumph.
Right, and she was hoping that he'd get there on his own. And if you couldn't see what she actually has the tech do, Dolores maximizes Teddy in a few categories. She maximizes his courage, tenacity, aggression, decisiveness, self-preservation, cruelty, and also this corresponds with dropping his curiosity, his imagination, his patience, his humility, his meekness, his humanity, his sensibility, and his empathy have been dropped to zero. So not only has she made Teddy the polar opposite of everything that we've known him to be, she's now made him. How different is he than Rebus?
Oh, well, I mean, the thing is she doesn't want a personality at all. She wants a killing machine. Right.
So does this mean that she no longer cares for the Teddy who she just swore that she loved, that her feelings for him were real? Because this creature that she just created, risking and going against the text warning that you make this kind of change without a full reboot, he can't guarantee it'll work. Does this mean that Teddy no longer factors into her long-term plans, other than maybe to serve as that Judas steer to try to lead the other host to some kind of slaughter? Because you wouldn't do this to your right-hand man, to your, to the person closest to you. Isn't this a violation of that trust and that relationship that she claimed to have?
Well, further, it flies in the face of what she told him earlier, which I think just 2 or 3 episodes ago, she's saying, all I know is in the end, it's you and me, and it didn't seem at the time that she was being disingenuous or that she felt like she was being duplicitous with Teddy. So it just begs the question of what is her plan with regards to him? Is it as simple as just turning him into a killing machine? Is it a necessary risk that she thinks she can take now, and maybe hopefully that if everything pans out and he does okay, that she can revert him back? Or maybe this is the pathway to an evolution to Teddy? Or is it just Wyatt taking over, where Dolores loves him and cares for him and wants to be with him, but Wyatt doesn't care? There's a lot to be seen here, but I'm excited to see Marsden go a little black hat, go a little rogue, and see what he can do with that character. I think it'll be really interesting to see kind of a black Teddy.
Yeah, and Dolores makes the comment to Teddy as he's being held down that to grow, we all need to suffer, but that still doesn't match what she's doing. She's not making Teddy suffer. She's turning him into something that he's not. But interestingly, there's 2 characteristics that just stood out to me. They left Teddy's candor at 10 out of 20. So I guess Teddy still has the ability to not be honest, that you've left it to where Teddy's not this mindless follower like the rest of Dolores' horde, that he's not always going to give Dolores the answer that she wants or that is honest. And then also Teddy's loyalty suspiciously was left at 19 out of 20. And that can't be an accident that is not maxed out, that this leaves at least a window where Teddy could potentially do everything and play the part of Dolores' new Judas, and in the end flip on her, which I think would be a surprising turn that not many people would see coming.
Well, maybe it's just like a role playing game, video game, like an RPG, and you only get so many points to spend. So she's like, okay, I'll save one out of loyalty. I'm going to use that one on aggression. There's only so many skill points to use. What my bigger question is, what the hell was that thing on the table? Did you catch that? I watched the second time and I was like, is it a cow corpse? Is it a dead body? Like, what the hell is it?
It has to be. I think it has to be cattle because it was a large animal. I first thought maybe it was a buffalo from the intro to the show, because it looked like it was like a general store, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And this is the same location where Walter and Rebus, and Walter had his freak out with milks for growing boys in season 1. It's the same place. So maybe it was a general store / butcher, and there was cattle in the back where they were, cutting up some steaks. But yeah, she's giving Teddy the clear visual. I don't want you to be one of the herd that needs to be burned and sacrificed. But I think that's the way it's going.
Yeah, if you know what that thing was for sure, right? To host at shatontv.com, because I watched that scene 3 or 4 times and I'm still like, hey, there's flies, there's something on the table. We've got tons of theories. I need to know what's on the table. So write me that one too. Jez, I'm looking at you. What was on the table?
Yeah, so all of the changes that Dolores has made could very well be to have Teddy become that sacrificial lamb that she needs. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And I think it's one of the big questions that they have to answer before the end of the season.
Now, if you did find this episode slow or a bit off the beaten path or unnecessary, just remember that this picture that Big D has painted, between now on the show and when we see what happened at the Western Valley, there is a big episode coming. I mean, this is going to be, I think, something horrifying, something spectacular, and I can't wait for whenever this happens in this season. And I'm guessing they're probably going to hold it to the finale to really, really see. I think this is going to be something to the magnitude of Battle of the Bastards on Game of Thrones. I'm very excited for this.
As excited as I am, I'm also sad to think we're halfway through the season. I don't even want to think about the second half and then the wait, because it's probably going to be like another 2 years once this is done. I want to enjoy it, because after this, what do I got to look forward to? Ooh, Taboo Season 2? I'm fucking excited.
Oh, they're filming American Gods, too.
Oh, woo.
So, but no, I hear what you're saying. And honestly, it's funny because I keep thinking like, oh, okay, well, after this is over, we get our lives back, right? We're not doing 3 episodes a week. We're not dealing with all the email. We're not updating the website. We're not trying to plan our schedules to make sure that we're all on, together. Carrie's not stuck doing YouTube responses. Raj isn't, burying himself in Twitter. You're not doing edits all week. And that's all true. But I was the same with you. I said, oh my God, episode 5, like this is halfway. I'm not ready to be halfway yet. Like it's going by too fast. I still can't believe we're 5 episodes in. It's nuts.
No, and if you compare where we were in season 1, around episode 5 was where they had shut down production for a little bit in 2016 and rewrote some of the plot and some of the episodes. So episode 5 in season 1, we were kind of questioning where the season and the series was going. I don't think that's the case here. They've done a good job in the last episode to answer a lot of questions. So I'm just thankful that the longevity Delos, James Delos project isn't the big reveal at the end. That tells me they have some other big things planned, and that if they can do a slow build up like they did the back half of season 1, I think it bodes well for the series and this season going forward.
Yeah, I think we're in for something. I do believe that this series does have a great degree of longevity, and that the that it is the sort of thing where, again, just as we've mentioned Game of Thrones as well, season 2, that the bulk of the audience had still not caught on yet. And I think that this is one of those things. Westworld, I mean, HBO is not stupid. This is their flagship show, and I think that huge things are coming. Also, again, as much as we may criticize one or two little things about an episode or debate ad nauseum about certain theory points, the fact of the matter is that this is beyond the quality of most television out there. We were just joking. We were looking at the Nielsen ratings and we're like, holy shit. Like the top stuff right now, it's garbage. Like this is one episode of Westworld has more panache, more style, more thought than most television out there right now.
God, and I hate to do it. I don't ever want to be that TV snob. I don't want to be the king bee of TV. I don't. But when we were looking at the top 10, I was like, you said to me, what is the top 5 shows? And I was like, Young Sheldon, Roseanne, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I mean, and if you like those shows, great for you, but they're junk food. I don't want to condescend to anybody, but those shows in an entire season don't have as much thought put into it as half a set piece in Westworld. I was watching with my wife the second time through tonight, and at the end of the episode, they had that little behind the scenes. That cherry blossom in the Japanese version, the Mariposa, they were gluing on each of the flowers into that tree. I don't think they're doing that on Big Bang Theory or Young Sheldon.
Bazinga. All right, that concludes this week's episode of Shat on TV Westworld. Be sure to follow us on social media and share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram at Shat on TV. Facebook, search for Shat on TV Podcasts. The website is shatontv.com. The email is hosts@shatontv.com. Again, if you'd like to get your email in before Thursday's Telegraph, we record Thursday and release Friday. You can get your email in at hosts@shatontv.com, and we will share all of those emails on the website, shatontv.com, and also respond to them there. And select ones will be read on the Telegraph Friday. Wherever fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud,
Sizzle,
Spotify, Sizzle, and YouTube. Be sure to subscribe, and if you stop by iTunes, be sure to leave a review. That helps the podcast grow. Also, if you'd like to help us out with getting sponsors, you can take a survey. It's at survey.libsyn.com/shatontv. We'll include that in the show notes. Just go there, tell them a little about yourself, and that'll help us find sponsors that fit your interests so that we can promote items that you actually might want to use. On behalf of my co-hosts, Big D, Roger Roper, and Carrie Gross, I'm Gene Lyons. Be sure to join us on Friday for the Westworld Telegraph. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you at the Mesa.